We're pretty much always taught to think of high intelligence as this amazing superpower, right? Like it's a golden ticket to an easier life. But what if that's just a myth? Turns out, psychology shows us that for a lot of people, a brilliant mind actually comes with its own set of really unique and sometimes really heavy burdens.
And that brings us to this fascinating paradox we're diving into today. The big question is a powerful mind a gift or is it a burden? I mean, if you've ever felt just completely exhausted by your own thoughts, or like you're somehow fundamentally different from everyone around you, then stick around. You are about to find out exactly why that is.
And wow, the contrast here is it's huge. On one side, you've got the popular myth, right? This idea of effortless success, social grace, making quick, confident decisions. But then on the other side, you have the reality that psychology so often points to, just crushing mental exhaustion, a deep sense of loneliness, and this constant low-level hum of anxiety.
So this whole thing, this is what experts call the intelligence paradox. It's this really counterintuitive idea that a brilliant mind can actually feel like a heavy weight to carry around.
Okay, so how does this paradox actually show up in real life? Well, we're going to break it down. We're looking at 5 surprising and really common struggles that highly intelligent people face.
All right, let's dive into these 5 key struggles that psychology has really zeroed in on.
All right, first up, and this is a big one. They overthink constantly. And I don't mean just your regular everyday worrying. For them, it's their brain's default setting. It's a fundamental mode of operation.
So what's actually happening here? Well, their brains are basically running constant mental simulations. Research actually links higher cognitive ability directly to more analytical processing. It's kind of like having a supercomputer in your head that just never ever stops running what-if scenarios for every single situation.
And as you can imagine, the effects of this are just draining. It means endlessly replaying conversations in your head, analyzing every single possible outcome of a decision, and maybe the most frustrating part, just having a really hard time switching the brain off to get some rest.
Okay, number 2. This one really centers on connection. See, highly intelligent people often have this deep need for meaningful conversation. They crave real substance.
But what do they usually get? Small talk. And that gap, that chasm between their desire for depth and the typical day-to-day chatter, well, it can leave them feeling profoundly misunderstood and honestly, pretty isolated.
There's actually a term for this. It's called layered thinking. Basically, because they're processing information on all these different abstract and complex levels at once, a simple conversation can just feel, well, unfulfilling. This pushes them to look for fewer but much more meaningful relationships. The downside? The unintended consequence is often loneliness.
And that brings us right to our third point, which really builds on that last idea. A constant nagging struggle with perfectionism. And we're not just talking about, wanting to do a good job. This is something way more intense.
This cycle really breaks it down perfectly. It starts because they can see the perfect outcome so clearly in their mind. So anything less than that, it can feel like a total failure. Average results become incredibly frustrating. And of course, that leads to some really harsh self-criticism, which over time can snowball into a paralyzing fear of failure.
Okay, our fourth struggle is a profound one. See, advanced reasoning doesn't just stick to practical, everyday problems. It naturally expands and it starts to ponder the big, existential questions. So, while a lot of people are focused on their daily to-do lists, a highly analytical mind can get stuck on questions like, what is my purpose? Or, what does any of this even mean? And this search for meaning isn't just some casual thought. It can become a constant underlying hum in their lives.
And then, why are we even here? This kind of relentless questioning about purpose and meaning and mortality, it can lead to a state of what's called existential anxiety. And that is a heavy burden to carry, especially when the world around you seems to be focused on much simpler things.
And that brings us to our 5th and final struggle. They notice everything. I mean it. Their brains are just wired for pattern recognition on a massive scale, and it's not something they can just turn off.
But this kind of hyper-awareness, it can be a real burden. They're the ones who see what other people miss. Things like subtle patterns in behavior, logical flaws in an argument, injustice baked into a system, or just maddening inefficiency in a process. And while that's absolutely a strength, this constant analysis is exhausting. And to other people, it can make them seem too intense, or maybe even overly critical.
So after hearing all that, it would be really easy to think this all sounds pretty bleak, right? But this is where we need to reframe the entire conversation. Because these aren't character flaws. They are the byproducts of a mind that is just wired differently. It's time to stop seeing this as a burden and start seeing it as your greatest strength.
I want you to really let this sink in. You're not difficult, you're just wired differently. That is the crucial takeaway here. All of it, the overthinking, the craving for depth, the perfectionism, it's all part of a unique cognitive package.
And that leads us to one last, really powerful question to leave you with. Your mind sees the patterns, the flaws, and the possibilities that so many other people just miss. So the real question isn't whether your intelligence is a burden. The real question is, how are you going to use that power?